show? Why did you start the Business Conversations with Gaitha? I always tell people I'm all about creating wealth, and I thought it was very important. It was very important that everybody is actually thinking about creating wealth, especially generational wealth. And when you're thinking about creating wealth, I always say you have to think about investment income, or you need to be actually in business, either running that business actively or passively. You actually have to be in that position so as to be able to create wealth. So again, before I go on and on, I'll go ahead and read the bio of Mr. Edwin Dande. He's done a lot in the US, also in Kenya. And also I'll go ahead and just read his bio so you can actually have an understanding about what he's done in his career. So Mr. Edwin H. Dande is the Chief Executive Officer at Cytonn Investments. Cytonn is an alternative investment manager focused on real estate and private equity. They serve high net worth, the diaspora, and institutional investors, specializing in master plan and gated community development. Prior to co-founding Cytonn, Edwin led a team that transformed Britam Asset Managers to the leading locally managed alternative manager in Kenya before the team left to form Cytonn. Prior to money management, he was an investment banker with Lehman Brothers and Bank of America Merrill in New York, where he focused on mergers and acquisitions, debt and equity capital raise for financial institutions. He started his career at KPMG, New Jersey as an auditor. He holds an MBA from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. He has a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from Monmouth University, and he is a certified public accountant in the state of New Jersey. Edwin has been recognized by the Institute of Choiseul Top 200 Business Leaders in Africa 2014, Business Daily Africa Top 40 Under 40 Men in 2012, and Who's Who in American Colleges and University. So if you can read from the bio, he's done a lot. And one thing we have in common with Edwin is we actually worked for Bank of America back in the early 2000s. So I'm very excited for him to actually share with me, or all of us, actually his experience in that. So Edwin, welcome to Business Conversations with Gaitha. And before I go ahead and just delve into this conversation, like I said, you are well known, or Cytonn brand is well known. Go ahead and just let us know why did you make that decision to start Cytonn with your founding members? What was that actually made you think that was the right time, and why become an investment manager, especially in alternative investment? So welcome, Edwin, to the show.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. It's my first time on your show, and looking forward to coming back in the future. Going back to your question, why Cytonn? To be candid, it was never a plan. We never sat down and say, now we are going to start a brand. we just reached a point, or let me say, I just reached a point at my previous employer where I felt that it was time to jump in and create a brand behind an opportunity that we had seen. Whenever you are in corporate, a point which is where you feel that you're arguing too much around strategy, you're arguing about direction, and you know corporate, and which is a place where I'm seeing Cytonn get to, where you now have a lot of structures, a lot of committees. At some point, the entrepreneurial spirit comes out, and you feel like, okay, why do I have to keep arguing with this board, or why do I have to keep arguing with this boss about this particular direction? I have the data, the opportunity is obvious, why don't I go out and try it? So that's what brought out the idea of Cytonn. I had colleagues who also said, you know, we believe in that direction, which was essentially, on one hand, you have Kenyans who want a better yield than they would get in a bank deposit, for example. So we asked ourselves, if you were to give these guys a better yield, and the better yield would be the same rate you pay to a bank to borrow money, what about if you borrow it directly from the individuals, giving them 14 to 18%, would they give you the money? We found that they will give you the money. Now, what do you do with this money? There are many areas where you could put money. We asked ourselves, if you look at a community in Nairobi, for example, and I don't know yourself where you live, but it's very hard to find a community where you are assured of backup power. If electricity goes out, the generator kicks in, you are assured of water. That means you're not relying on county government water, reliable sewer, and then reliable stormwater drainage. So we asked ourselves, if we build comprehensive lifestyle communities where people are guaranteed electricity, they're guaranteed water, sewer is working, when there is a heavy rain, the stormwater drainage is effective, is this something that people would be interested in? And our research told us, yes, there's hunger for those kinds of communities. The only reason why developers are putting up 40 units, 100 units that don't have that scale is because of lack of capital. So we brought together a strategy where you raise money on one hand and you deploy it to build comprehensive lifestyle development, such as the Alma in Huaca. So then we said, why don't we come together, form a brand and see if this can work? And now we are starting our 7th year. So far so good, with a lot of challenges, but we are still pushing ahead.
Great, Edwin, for that. One of the things that you highlighted was you saw an opportunity and you took it. And really, it's about that entrepreneurship mindset. A lot of people have asked me also the same question. Why do you move from corporate to entrepreneurship? And I always tell them it's because once you see an opportunity and you figure out how you can make money and solve a problem, that is what you're trying to do as an entrepreneur. And you're actually going to make an impact. At the same time, you're going to make a lot of money. But again, business is not easy. So you just alluded to some of the challenges that businesses have. So tell me, what has been the biggest challenge in building a great African brand in the financial service industry? What has been the biggest challenge in building that business, and especially a brand that people can trust, people can recognize, and people can understand? What has been the challenge, the biggest?
Before I talk about the biggest challenge, there's something you just mentioned. Why the transition? The one thing somebody should never do is to transition from corporate to entrepreneurship because you are running away from something. It has to be because you have seen an opportunity to make an impact. You have seen the opportunity to drive things faster than you could drive. So you have to be going after something, not running away from something. If you just transition and say, I want to transition because I want to be my own boss, I want to transition because I don't like my job, that is the wrong reason that you are likely going to fail. The right reason ought to be, what have you seen, what are you going after, and what is the impact that you're likely to make. Going back to your current question, in terms of the biggest challenge, interestingly, the biggest challenge is very similar to where we are. When we are called emerging markets, when we are called a third world country, unfortunately, we don't have the mentality to be very excellent in everything that we do. We have a culture of cutting corners. We have a culture, quite frankly, I call it mediocrity. So the biggest challenge for me that I've seen is, which is also our biggest success, getting very determined people, very talented people. It is very hard to get determined, talented people who have a long-term view. So the talent part has been our biggest opportunity in terms of creating the business, but also being our biggest challenge in terms of getting people with that aligned vision, looking long-term, people who feel that, look, before I hand it over to my boss, I believe that I have done my very best. There's nothing more I could do, as opposed to the prevailing culture where we want to make the most amount of money with the least amount of work in the shortest time possible. So getting people who believe in building rather than entrepreneurship is incredibly hard in this environment. But if you are able to get them, then you're obviously going to be able to compete in the market because not everybody is thinking long-term excellence, delivering the best.
Wow, it's good to really hear that answer. And the reason I say why it's a good idea, why it's really good to hear that answer is because I've been telling a lot of business people that the 3 things you really need to focus on are your financial assets, your brand assets, and your talent assets. In this case, when I look at financial assets, I do see you had a backing by a Finland investor. So you had the financial assets and the backing and the know-how. You have actually built a big brand that is recognizable. So those are not issues. But what you're saying is actually the talent, actually getting the culture of people who want to go beyond and don't want to be just average. That has been the challenge for you. But again, you've been working on it. So I'm really happy to really hear about that. The challenge, but also the solutions you've come in, making sure that they're trained and making sure that they do a great service. Because one thing I know that people have said about Cytonn is really your customer service. Not only your products, but actually how you deliver. So I'm really happy to hear about that challenge, but also the solutions that you've done. And I hope business people are paying attention to that. So, so Edwin, the next question I have for you is really, what lessons did you learn in your corporate career that have enabled you to run a successful business? If you had to say, this is the biggest lesson of some of the lessons that I learned in corporate, what would you say?
It's an interesting question, Anne, because once you move from corporate to entrepreneurship, you quickly realize that this is a very different animal. So corporate does not quite prepare you. But given that you've asked, what is the one thing that you took from corporate? And corporate, for me, is starting as an accountant at KPMG, doing investment banking at both Lehman and Bank of America, then asset management at Brigham Asset Managers. When I look at the common thread, at least for me, what worked for me in corporate is what I learned as an investment banker, being very detailed, working hard, and out competing the competitor. So you have to put in more hours, you have to put in more intense work, you have to be detailed. That's how you're going to put the very best product in the market. It's unfortunate the Lehman brand is no longer with us, but for very different reasons. But for people who worked at Lehman, it was about doing as much as you can with as little as possible and going against big brands like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. So that aspect of it is more about talent. If I could tie it to what you just talked about, your financial asset, your brand asset, and then your talent, Lehman really emphasized talent as the number one. Yes, it's good to have financial assets, but you can always raise money. It's a lot easier to raise money than to get good talent that is long-term, that is detailed, that is executing. So the one thing that I could pick on that I would say this really prepared me for the entrepreneurial world was just sheer hard work, focus, and detail. But having said that, entrepreneurship is very different. If you're in corporate, there's a finance department that's doing finances. There is a brand department and marketing that is facing the client. There's a product development. There are a lot of support networks around you. Now, here we are where we are 4 people, we come together. You are 4 people, and within those people, you get the CEO, you have to get the head of legal, the chief investment officer, the investment manager. You have to create a vision that ends up having almost 15 departments over a 6-year period. So once you get into entrepreneurship, you have to do a lot of work with very little. But as long as you have your eye on the vision, and as long as your vision makes sense, because you can't just leave and pursue a vision that can never make money. The vision has to be sensible. As long as your vision makes sense, the team is focused, and you execute, you will you increase your chances of success, because every day in entrepreneurship is to work so hard to improve the chances of success and reduce the likelihood of failure. So as long as you are executing, you increase the likelihood of success. And that for me was learned from detailed work, but I don't think corporate can really prepare you for entrepreneurship.
Wow, that's a very interesting answer, because somewhat I agree with you. Corporate is very different from business, but I think what you've actually said is hard work, because even in corporate, it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, but in entrepreneurship, it's even more challenging. But what you say is always have an eye on the vision. For every business person, I always tell them, you actually have to hold the vision and trust the process. Trust the process that it will happen if that's what you really want to do. But I also think in corporate, the biggest thing that I've seen in the Kenyan culture and the way businesses are run, it's very informal. And I think maybe, I don't know if you can talk more about that, because I feel like if businesses run more professionally, they're more formal, then they can actually be able to be scalable, sustainable, successful, and they can be able to do things like access finance, capital. They can be able to access bigger and larger markets internationally and regionally. What do you think about that? Is process something that you think businesses in Kenya need to actually focus on and becoming more formal as opposed to staying in the informal economy as we see happening?
I would agree with you. And the informality, I mean, it also ties to our culture. We are a very collegial culture, the so-called African hospitality. So you sit around a table, you share a cup of tea, or you share a meal, and you make decisions, which is all fine. But that ought to be a forum for ideas. Once you have ideas, or you have what I would call informal decisions, you now have to engage a formal process, which is board meetings, which are memos, papers, corporate governance, and there we could do better. When you say when you call it informality, for me, I would add it to the basket of what I call mediocrity, where you don't want to go through a rigorous process to be able to reach a decision. One of the industries that seems to have that issue is the retail industry. I think retail is a very lucrative place to be. If you look at retail, formal retail penetration in this country is still 30%. You look at more developed countries, is 80%. So there's a huge opportunity to move from a 30% formal retail, where you go to a supermarket, from 30% to 80%. Yet we continuously have retail organizations failing. If you really look at why they are failing, it has nothing to do with the retail market. Carrefour is doing great. Naivas is doing great. They recently got an international investor buy a stake in the company. If you look at some of these guys who are struggling, the issues around governance and informality. So if we can bring more formality to the boardroom, if we can bring more formality to the hiring process. I mean, I work at a place where I always tell people, if you want to supply for Cytonn, the worst person that can possibly help you is the CEO's office, because they don't handle procurement. If you have a product at a competitive price and you approach procurement and you go through the process, you don't need to know anybody. If you want to work at Cytonn, the CEO's office or any senior person cannot help you. Just get the JD online, look at what are the requirements, engage the process, and if you are the best candidate, or if you're one of the best candidates in case of an internship program, you will get the job, because we have formalized pretty much all processes so that we do not have individuals who are brokers to be able to help you get a job or to help you get a tender. So I think one of the things I talked about, every day you have to wake up and do work to improve the likelihood of success. Formalizing things helps so that it is not an individual, it is the office. And then it also reduces opportunities for corruption when you know, okay, if I want to supply to a farm, I don't need to know anyone. I just need to have the best product at the best price. And then when I get the opportunity, I have the best execution. So I totally agree with you. Informality is one of the things that we really need to reduce in the boardroom and in our corporations. And then when you move into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of likelihood of being informal, because you move from a corporate where everything was being done according to process. Now you are running your own business. You feel like you can just make a decision. One of the things entrepreneurs should do as fast as possible is to come up with a policies, processes, and procedures manual where everybody knows this is how things are done here. I don't need to know people. I need to know what is the process.
Wow, that is a lot of information, and I hope people are paying attention. You know, Edwin, we have a global audience. So we have people in Kenya, people in the States, people in Europe and in the UK. So what he was really talking about was Kenya, because that's what I asked for him. But yes, I do agree. Even internationally, we should have more of formal economy and more professional run businesses. Those are the only ones that can actually scale up. So for some of you who are on Zoom, and I see others joining us on Facebook, I know you have very many questions to ask Edwin. So what I would recommend is just put the question on the chat and we'll get back to you, and I will give the opportunity for Edwin to answer any questions that you may have in regards to transitioning from corporate to entrepreneurship, and also how do you run a successful business? How do you run a successful business, especially during this time of COVID-19 and everything that business people have experienced? It's been quite challenging. So tell me, Edwin, for you, and I think a lot of businesses that you're aware of have been really affected by this pandemic, especially people who do not provide essential services. So my question for you is, as a CEO, right, as a captain of industry, as the CEO and the top person at Cytonn, how are you navigating this crisis? And what would you share with people who run businesses? What should they be doing during this time of crisis to make sure that the business continues even after the crisis? So tell me, what do you think?
When it comes to COVID, of course, the first thing is safety of the individual. So that's the one thing that every individual, whether they are a business driver or an entrepreneur or a CEO, the first thing that you have to wake up every day is thinking about safety. Of course, you cannot help people to be safe unless you are also safe. So the usual stuff that we've been told, sanitize, wear your mask, keep a social distance. I recently did an interview with Caroline Mutoko, and I emphasized on one that is not talked about a lot, which is managing yourself emotionally. I mean, it is a disease that is a global pandemic, has destroyed jobs, has destroyed livelihoods. So there's no way then that we can say it's also not going to weigh down on us emotionally. So you also have to take care of yourself and the people around you emotionally and spiritually. So that's the first set, which is about safety, physical safety, emotional. Once you have then taken care of the safety part of it, is to ask yourself, okay, if individuals are safe, I need the business to be safe and to be able to go through the pandemic. So that means managing costs, staying close to clients, being very candid about your challenges. I mean, there are those businesses that are having a good run during COVID. Maybe you're in healthcare, you're in the digital space. Ourselves, our digital business, which is the Cytonn Money Market Fund, is doing great, has grown tremendously during COVID. But we have another business, which is the real estate business. The moment COVID hit, people don't want to go to the office. People don't want to go to restaurants. People who have bought units cannot perform. So real estate, in terms of cash flows, drops dramatically. You have to stay close to clients, and this is a challenge. This is what we are doing about it, and it's a temporary setback. From a business perspective, I look at COVID as a detour. It will not be here with us for a while. We were on a highway. We have taken a detour to deal with the COVID challenge. We will be back on the highway. Of course, it's going to take having a vaccine. But once we have that sorted out, we'll go back to, I wouldn't say life as we had it, but we'll go back to a more normal life. So take care of yourself from a healthcare perspective, then take care of your business in terms of cutting costs, in terms of staying close to your clients, and also doing as much as possible to keep your people. Unfortunately, we've not been one of those who can say we have been able to go through COVID without layoffs. Where you have to make tough decisions, you cannot shy away from them. But once you've taken care of the individual, taken care of the team, and taken care of the business, COVID will be behind us. We'll learn a lot of lessons during COVID, and we have a brilliant future ahead for those who have business models that make sense.
Wow. Okay. So you do what you have to do to make sure your business survives, with sometimes the hard things like cutting costs, also laying off people. But those are decisions as a CEO that you have to make, because you have to make sure the business survives and that you're offering the solutions for your clients. So glad to hear about that. But the key here for me, you said, was mental health. I cannot tell you enough people who are both employers and employees. This has been a challenge. This has been a challenge because people have been in a position where they're like, this has never happened before, and it's really hard for them to deal with it. So even me, I've been telling people, take care of your mental health, take care about your physical health, take care about your financial health. I talk a lot about financial health, which I think is really going to help people. And actually that comes back to my next question about financial health. The main thing I always tell people, because people want to come to us at Regal Africa and they want to be rich like yesterday. And I'm like, no. I talk about being wealthy, and I always say it's a process. But the first thing I always tell people is you need to have an emergency fund for at least 6 months, right? Before I used to say 3 to 6 months, now I'm saying 6 months and even more if you can. One of the things that Cytonn has done is the money market, which is really something I always tell people that they should look at. Why did you think it was necessary, in your opinion, that you actually promote the money market, and especially using technology in regards to the mobile wallet to make sure that people are able to save and at the same time be able to access their money anytime? Did you think this was the right time, or was it always part of the plan to make sure that people are financially healthy by saving, but also having access to their money when they need it?
Financial health is important just the same way, spiritual health. Before COVID, most people during weekends, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, they go to church to get that spiritual nourishment. Financial health is important. That's why we go to work to make an income. We also need to be healthy medically. That's why we visit our doctor. So all these pieces are important. We have to be healthy in the mind. That's why we read newspapers, we read books. So financial health is a core important part. If you cannot pay your bills, you are unlikely to feel comfortable and good about yourself. The ability to pay your bills as they come due, the ability to save for a future, the ability to have the freedom to take a trip or to take a vacation is something that every human aspires to. People want to create families. Those things cost money. So you have to focus on your financial health, and in a very deliberate way, where you have to have a meeting with yourself at least monthly to think about how does my balance sheet look like? Is my income trajectory or salary trajectory where I need it to be? If I'm in debt, how am I working through that debt? If I'm restructuring my loans, how am I doing based on plan? So you have to have a financial plan. It's incredibly important. Now, we sell what I call financial planning, not any particular product, and I'll come to money market in a second, because there's no, as long as a financial product is good, there's no product that you can say this is better than the other. People ought to have bank accounts for money that they will need to pay bills over the next few weeks, because it is money that you want ready and you want to transact. Money that you don't need immediately, but you know for sure you will need to pay fees at some point within the next 1 year. You put it in a money market fund because you want some yield for it. Money market should at least earn you a couple percentage points above a 1 year government bond, which is government paper, which is returning 7 to 8%. So you should expect your money market to give you anywhere between 8 to 10%. For money that you can keep for the long term, you want to build wealth on it that you cannot earn from the bank, that you cannot earn from money market. So that belongs to, if you have a 5-year horizon, you can put it in an equity fund, which could go up or could go down. We have another product, a high yield fund. There's one that's regulated. There's another one that is not regulated. You can buy a plot if you really have a long-term view. So no particular product is better than the other. It's about financial planning and diversifying your risks based on your investment objectives and investment horizon. So the money market fund, where we saw an opportunity was for people who want a high yield. 10% return, if you have 10,000 shillings, is incredibly hard to get in a bank. So for somebody who wants a 10% return, but they also want this money accessible, that's the kind of place where we saw an opportunity. There's nowhere else where you can get 10% per annum if you have as little as 10,000 and yet be able to access that money instantly. So we looked at the market and saw that almost all money market funds require you to fill in a form to be able to redeem your money over a 2 to 4 year, and a 2 to 4 day period, sorry, over 2 to 4 day period. So we asked ourselves, in this day and age, and given that Kenya is the home of mobile money, why would somebody wait 2 to 4 days to be able to access 1,000 shillings? Why would they have to fill in a form? It doesn't make sense. So we started exploring, how can we create a money market fund that gives the best yield given our asset allocation strategy, and also is instantaneously accessible if you need it, either to yourself, to your bank account, or to your M-Pesa, or you can even use it to pay someone else. So we've worked on the product, I would say, over the last 1.5 years, and today it is the most digitized money market fund. If you just hit *8 or 9 hash, you can join instantly. Within less than 5 minutes, you've already joined and put your money. The next day it starts earning 10%. And then anytime that you need it, you just get it, the withdrawal instantly. Within 3 minutes, you have your money wherever you want it to be. So that's the opportunity that we saw, and the fintech team is working very hard to make sure that the money market fund remains the most digitized money market fund, not just in Kenya, but in the region.
Okay, that's really great, Edwin, to just give us the fact that you've been working on it for 1.5 years. Even before COVID, you actually saw the opportunity and you're working on it, even though you've actually actualized it, the last couple of months. But because this is the business conversation, and really it's about how we can support businesses to actually be able to grow their businesses, do you think businesses need to be looking at their financial health? Because I see people paying attention to their personal finance, not so much savings for their business. What do you think about that?
Of course, you have.
Is that something businesses should be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to look at financial health for the business. And in the context of entrepreneurship, it's pretty challenging, because yes, you get people who will give you cash to grow your business. Ourselves, when we started, I think we sold 10% of our company to around 200 investors for around 100 million shillings when we started the business. That was helpful in terms of capital to start the business, but these guys will expect a certain return. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't have assets to pledge to the bank. You can't issue a bond. You can't issue equities in the public market. You can issue them in the private market. So it's incredibly hard to raise money. You're also creating a product and competing with brands that have been around. If I could connect it to our previous conversation, I mean, a money market fund is competing with money market funds that have been around for 12 years. So you have to sit and think, okay, I'm not entitled to getting money from people, but then I can create a product that is very unique, where people will say, let me try that particular product. So the financial health of a business is incredibly important, because if you cannot pay rent, if you cannot keep the lights on, if you cannot pay people, of course, then you will not be able to operate as a business. So you have to ask yourself, what are my bills on a monthly basis? What is the income? Even if you're borrowing to pay those bills, you cannot borrow forever. At some point, the business of an entrepreneur then has to be able to make money to be able to pay bills.
Okay. Thank you for that, Edwin. So we have the last question before I go to the audience. I see a few questions coming in on Zoom. And like I said, for anyone who is also on Facebook, if you have any questions, just go ahead and write it down, and we'll ensure that Edwin is able to answer that question for you as we wrap it up. So Edwin, the last question for you I have is, what are the great opportunities you see in Africa specifically, and what are the grand plans you have for Cytonn that you hope to accomplish by 2030? What do you see the opportunities in Africa? I'm very big on Africa, right? So that's why I asked that question. And also, what do you plan to do in Cytonn by 2030? And this is connected to Vision 2030 that Kenyan government has actually put in place, and financial services is really big, having the Nairobi International Financial Center. So I thought this would be a question that I would really like you to talk about, so that other business people can be able to learn from that. And also, yeah, so give me your thoughts about that.
Let me divide it into two, Africa and then Cytonn. Now, Africa is an interesting one because when you ask about what do I see and where the opportunities are, there's always a good and bad side of anything. The bad side about being in the third world is that it's a third world experience. The experience can always be better in any way, shape, or form. If you go to the first world, whether it's the roads, the hospitals, whatever it is, restaurants, you're always going to get better because it's the first world. And the downside of being in the third world is that you are always going to get a substandard product. But therein lies the opportunity. So when you ask where are the opportunities, I always say in Africa, pick anything. If it's roads, you can always use better roads. If it's hospitals, we can use better hospitals. Education, we can use better education. There is no particular industry where I can look at it and say there is no need for improvement. And that's why for us, we picked a spot where we think you can do it almost in any city in Africa because cities in Africa have an issue around infrastructure, reliable water, reliable sewer, reliable electricity. So we asked ourselves, if we put up comprehensive lifestyle communities where somebody will know, if I check into this development once it's done, something like the Alma, that I'll never have to deal with a blackout. I'll never have to deal with lack of electricity. My sewer will be very reliable. If we have heavy rainfall, the stormwater drainage, I mean, if you just take from the Alma, we are building a 400-meter stormwater drainage just to make sure that we have reliable stormwater drainage when we have heavy rains, because the government will not do it for you. When you take water, we are building a 1 million liter tank to make sure that we always have enough water stored, and we also sink a borehole to be always filling up that tank. So for us, we saw the opportunity as comprehensive lifestyle communities that solve the challenges that we have in our neighborhoods today. That's the area that we have picked. We can do the same, whether it's in Kampala, Dar es Salaam, Nairobi, it will be the same product. So I would not be able to say any one industry is better than the other. It's a question of where we started. Where do you see the opportunity to make an impact based on your skill set and experience? Pick any industry in Africa and you'll be able to provide a product that people will want. Coming back to Cytonn, I think we've tried several things. We've been in real estate, we've been in investments. At some point, we looked at procurement of building materials. We even thought about Cytonn College. But in the end, we realized we are really just good at two things. One is mobilizing investments and giving the investors a better return than they would get in other investment products. When we get that money, the vast majority of it goes to putting up comprehensive lifestyle communities that people want to live in and also that people cannot get. If you go to Ruaka, you cannot get a community like the Alma. If you go to Karen, you cannot get a gated community like Amara Ridge. Now, once done with the Alma, we'll then move to the Ridge. So that is what we are going to be doing. Comprehensive lifestyle communities that provide a lifestyle that you cannot get in any other neighborhood in the areas where we choose to build our development.
Wow, okay. So thank you for that and sharing light to what Cytonn wants to do and also what you think needs to be done in Africa, which is everything. Everything can be improved, so that is good. But one of the things that I took out, and I hope all the business people are paying attention, is that Cytonn, Edwin said that Cytonn has tried very many different things, but eventually they found a space where he said, this is what we are good at, and they're continuing to perfect that. And I see that happening with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people. You're trying to be everything and to be everything to everyone. Once you get to a point whereby you want to be really successful, you need to find your space so that you can excel in it. And I think what Edwin said was focus, 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 find out what it is that you're good at and keep doing it in excellence. So thank you again, Edwin, with that. And so for that, I'll take the next couple of minutes to to just read out some questions that the audience has. And so hopefully, Edwin, you'll be able to answer them comprehensively so that the audience can be able to come out with a good takeaway from this conversation that we've had with you. And again, thank you again for joining me in this business conversation. So Edwin, we have a question here from Esther who asked this. So she says, good evening, everyone. Amazing forum. How best can one make a sales team more productive? So Edwin, her question is around sales team. And you know in business, it's all about sales, sales, sales. Revenue, revenue, revenue for you to be sustainable. How best can one make a sales team more productive?
When you ask that, it comes back to, you asked me about some of the lessons learned in corporate, but you asked me about the best, I mean, the one lesson which I talked about, focus and hard work. But one of the lessons I learned in corporate was building a sales team. From my previous employer, I think they have one of the best sales teams in this country. Now, if you want to build a sales team, first you must have a sensible product. So before you push people to sell, you ask yourself, but why would anybody buy this particular product? Now, once you have a product that people would want to buy, the next thing is to find people who are hardworking, brilliant, because you have to train, they have to know what they are selling. And then you have to build the sales team structure, because it starts with, you have a team that reports to some sort of team leader, who then reports to some sort of unit leader. So that's after product, then it's the structure of the team. So once you have your product right, then you have the structure of the team right, because sales has to have consistency. As human beings, consistency can only happen in a structured environment. So you have to have that structure for the team. Then of course you have to then motivate people, create key performance measures, and then incentives. If you meet your targets, then these are the consequences. If you don't meet your targets, then this is going to be the consequence. And then also enable the team through consistent training, product knowledge. Almost you have to have it on a weekly basis where you are training on something. You have to have motivational sessions. So I think if you have the right product, then you have the right team structure, you have the right incentives, and then you're investing in their knowledge over a period of time, because it also takes time for the sales cycle to happen. Then you should end up with a good sales team. Our sales team is around 200 people who every day they wake up and look to push our product in the market. Of course, like any other sales teams, the law of nature is 20% of your sales team who are the top performers will give you 80% of your sales. But the other 80% is also important because they are still growing, they are still learning, and at some point they will rise and get into the top producing 20%.
Okay, great for that. And I hope, Esther, you got that question. The only thing I need to add, because I think we also sort of trained the same way with Edwin, besides products, good team structure and motivation and training, which I really agree. One of the things I can tell you from me and why I ended up going into sales when, I became someone really good in sales was incentives. People are moved by money, and salespeople make a lot of money through commission. So if you can incentivize your sales team, motivate them, but hire right. I think for me, my biggest thing would be hire right. Hire the right people who are coachable, trainable, and who see the bigger picture and are thinking long term, because those are the people who will be with you in the long run, because you don't want to start training people and then they start leaving after you've trained them. So that's the only thing I'd add is hire right, and incentives is a really good thing. So the next question I have for you, Edwin, is from, let's see, I think I saw something here on Facebook from Nyambura. So Nyambura says, greetings, Mr. Edwin Dande. I have watched your business model for a while, and congratulations on getting your process right at Cytonn. I am a realtor by profession. What would you say about the real estate outlook in Kenya from now until 2025? Kind regards from My Swan Screen Limited. I would be interested in collaboration in the new economy with Cytonn. How do I go about this? as a selling agent. So I guess the question here really is, how did you perfect your business model? You've gotten your process right. And what is the real estate outlook in Kenya? So for people who are in real estate, running a real estate business, what do they need to be doing? And also at the very end, she talked about how can she then partner up with Cytonn as a selling agent.
Thanks, and let me start with the easiest. If you want to partner with Cytonn as a selling agent, and we do one of the things that Anna's talked about, we do pay attractive commissions. If it comes to investment products, I think we are the most competitive in the market in terms of commissions. If you want to join the team, all you have to do is to email ifa@Cytonn, ifa@cytonn.com. And one of the team members, a guy called Kevin, who is in charge of the IFA network, will definitely reach out to you and be able to take you through the process, which begins with what Anne talked about. We have to hire right to be able to then train, incentivize, and develop a high-performing salesperson. So ifa@cytonn.com, that is the place to email if you want to join the sales team. As to our business model, we are always refining it. We talked about getting funding over a period of time. Our longest funding is 3 years that we get from clients, but we take money as short as 3 months. So funding directly from the investor, which is also challenging because it's short-term funding. Sometimes they want it and you already committed it into real estate. So we're always working on our business model, but our business model is just to get money from investors and then commit into real estate. But business model is an ongoing process. We would like to get to a point where we have long-term capital to finance our long-term assets. Going to the biggest part of this question, outlook on real estate 2025. I will change it a little bit, Anne, and say, let's talk about outlook of real estate generally, because when we pick a specific period of time, like for example, had you asked somebody last year, will real estate be struggling right now? Nobody would know because nobody would predict Corona. But outlook generally, there is no question that we need more more aspirational real estate for residential purposes. So there'll be areas that are oversupplied, like offices in Upper Hill, for example. Office space is overdone. Retail, there are a lot of retailers that have pulled out of the market, so retail supply won't do well in this kind of market. But if you pick certain areas, for us, we picked, for example, Karen. Karen has the highest concentration of high-end schools anywhere in Kenya, high-end private schools. So in both good and bad markets, wealthy Kenyans want to send their kids to good private schools. I mean, it's interesting when I saw Brookhouse the other day telling parents, you know, you either pay or you leave. That school is located in Karen. And for me, it was validating because when people see us in Karen, they think we are there for the real estate, but the key underlying trend there is actually education. So how you pick your spots really does matter. The next place that you'll see us is places like Ruiru, Ruaka, Ridgeways. Kiambu County, of the 10 fastest growing towns in Kenya, 6 out of 10 are in Kiambu County. So the underlying trend there is compelling demographics. Where you have compelling demographics, real estate is going to do well. So when you pick a place like Waka with compelling demographics, high occupancy, then you also put a product that is like no other product in that market, where you say, this is the only place when the development is done, you will have reliable electricity, reliable water, reliable sewer, reliable security is very important, and you bring all manner of amenities, because it's not just the infrastructure. People want amenities. You bring all those amenities into the development, you are always going to do well. I mean, we've raised our prices for the Alma even during the pandemic, because as people see the product come to an end, they realize this is like unlike any other product that they have in that particular area. So real estate will be challenged like any other product depending on the cycles. But real estate for the long term, especially residential, because if you read the statistics, they say there's a housing deficit. I think it's like 2 million and it's growing by 200,000 every year. So already you're dealing in an area that has a deficit. If you would put a good product, the issue is product. Why would somebody want to buy your housing? Why would somebody want to rent your housing? If you're able to answer that question, you will certainly get uptake. So I would say it depends. If you have good product, real estate is a great place to be. If you don't have great product in this market, you're going to be challenged. But over the long term, real estate is a good place to be in a growing economy such as ours.
All right. Thank you, Edwin, for that. Appreciate your insights and your words of wisdom. Again, business people, just to continue, just to say what he said, know your market. Research is important. Put out a good product. But one of the things I will add, which he didn't allude to, but which is something Cytonn has done, is build a good brand, a brand that people can connect with. A good brand is very, very, very important. So I want to go ahead and say that's the only thing I would add from what Edwin else said. So I do see many more, comments on Facebook. People are saying this is really insightful. They're watching. The forum is priceless, priceless insights. So this is really, really great. So thank you again, Edwin, for joining us. There's only one question, but I don't think this would be the right forum. So I will actually have to tell Mary. I know you're asking about, you wanted Edwin to explain about the Cytonn High Yield Fund. I will say that what you can do is just reach out to us at Regal Africa, and we'll be able to explain that or connect to someone at Cytonn who can be able to give you details so you understand it better. Because again, today the focus was on business conversation about how do you build a successful business. And because we're out of time, I will hope that Mary, you'll just reach out to us so that then we can be able to answer that question for you and you can learn more about Cytonn. And for the rest of you who are online and also on online on Zoom and also on Facebook, I want to thank you again for joining us and just taking the time to listen to someone who's actually taken that entrepreneurial journey from corporate to entrepreneurship. He said it is a different animal, but the key here is hard work. It's hard work. And so before I let you go, I'll go ahead and just give you a few minutes, Edwin, to just give us your last thoughts or your last remarks. People joined in to actually listen. What can they do to build a successful business? What is it that you'd like to tell them?
I think it's to emphasize that there's incredible opportunity for entrepreneurship in this part of the world. And actually for this part of the world, I don't see it as a nice thing to do. And we have so many challenges in every sector that entrepreneurship is almost like a national imperative. People have to have the mindset of building, because only through building will we create industries which then create jobs. And when we create jobs, we then have better standards of living, and everybody aspires for a better standard of living. So when you're in an economy that is where there's a lot of unemployment, we need people to be entrepreneurs. We need a lot more people moving from corporate to entrepreneurship. But to do that, and as I said, I see it as a national imperative to have more entrepreneurs. But to do that, you have to do it for the right reason. And the number one reason, and actually I would say the only reason, ought to be what is driving you to entrepreneurship. What impact do you see? What is the spot in the market, the opening in the market where you think you can fill that particular spot with your product or service? It cannot be about running away from employment, running away from a boss or desire to be your own boss. It has to be about the impact and the opportunity that you can see yourself fulfilling in the market. Once you have identified that gap in the market that you want to fulfill, that impact that you want to make, then the next thing is, how will you do it? What are your competitive advantages. You could be good in technology. You could have a balance sheet. You have to be clear. If, for example, I see a need in the market for a money market fund where people can withdraw instantly, that means I need to have technology. If I don't have technology, I won't be able to compete. So how will you compete to deliver that particular impact? Once you figured out the opportunity, you figured out how you're going to compete, where a lot of us will fall short now is on the execution. You have to be able to execute, and execution is very difficult. You have to be detailed. You have client lists growing. I've seen our clients grow from zero. I still remember client number 1 to now over 20,000. It's incredibly hard to service 20,000 clients with the same culture, with the same people, and with the same technology. It would be a lot easier to start ignoring clients, but you have to say, we have to respond to every client and within a certain period of time. So execution is very, for lack of a better word, it's dirty work. It's being in the trenches. It's tiring. You have to wake up and do the same thing every day. But as long as you have your eye on the vision, the impact you're making, then this grunt work does not become as tiring as it is if you take your eyes off the ball. So I would say, get the opportunity, get the team, figure out how you're going to compete. Then, as Jack Welch says, execute like hell. If you do that, the money shall follow, the brand shall follow, the rewards shall follow. But you first have to start with those 4 key things. Identify your opportunity, put the team together, figure out how you're going to compete, but most importantly, which a lot of us don't like, is to execute. You have to wake up early, work hard, and work late. That would be my closing remark. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you for those words. Impact, impact, impact. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Solve a problem. But I always say, after you do all that in business, you're making wealth for yourself and you're creating generational wealth. So again, thank you again, Edwin, for joining us at the Business Conversation with Gaitha. And for all of you, thank you again for joining in for this episode 4. And we will see you each Wednesday at 6 p.m. East Africa time, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, for those of you who are in the US. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, the Regal Africa Group, which is the company that I run. Thank you again for doing all the work, the team there. East Gold, which is the platform that we use to actually link businesses to funding. So for any of you who are looking for funding, reach out to East Gold. And again, to Elite Global Branding, who have been doing a fabulous job putting this event together and branding me and the Regal Africa team, because one of the things I've really realized that are very important that a lot of African businesses do not do well in the execution of successful business is branding. And that's why I think that Edwin and his team have done a fabulous job branding themselves, being known for something very particular in regards to, if you want to create wealth, if you want to get really great returns, you can actually go to Cytonn and they will be able to deliver the promise. So again, thank you everyone for joining in. I appreciate, and have a good evening. Bye-bye and God bless.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.